Ladies and gentlemen, you are tuned in to the Rate Limited podcast with your host, Ray Fernando. We also have Eric Provencher, the founder of Repo Prompt, and we have now Adam Larson, Gosu Coder. We've made over the 1,000 subscriber mark and can afford Adam's last name. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. This show is going to be about AI practitioners right in the weeds of everything, building every single day. There's been so many new model releases in the last couple of weeks, from GPT 5.1, Gemini 3, Opus 4.5. Grok is in the mix. Kimi has some crazy stuff going on. We also have some updates on the last episode with Codex and their truncation issue, and a whole bunch of other things with Dwarkesh's podcast talking about ASI with Ilya, and so much more. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're excited to have you on the show. This is going to be a really packed episode, so make sure you stay buckled up, follow those timestamps, and we'll catch you soon.
Yeah, thanks for that intro, Ray. So to start things off, I just wanted to do a little quick follow-up on last week's episode where we talked a little bit about issues around Codex truncating context with tool calls. So if you're not familiar or you didn't listen to that episode, the key issue is that, like, unlike other AI coding agents, Codex was doing this optimization where it would, if you return too much in a tool call, like it's going off and reading a file or reading some bash output, basically it would cut off the middle part of the output to fit in some line-based rules. And so following that discovery, I had opened a GitHub issue, made some noise about it, and tweeted it here, and they actually addressed it in the release last week, and now all of the truncation is done by token limits, which is a big step up. And they added a configuration flag, which you can use as well in the config file. So if you are feeling that this is an issue for you, you can either reach out in the comments, or we can put a little note in there to say what the flag is. You can go ahead and set if you want, but you can actually fix that yourself if it's a problem. And it's great to see their response to feedback. So I just wanted to put a little close on that saga. It's nice to see it done. It's too bad the limits are still quite low at 2.5K tokens, which is quite there's not a lot. But anyway, it's good to see them fix that. And yeah, so since that happened, actually that release that fixed it for the Codex CLI, it came alongside Codex 5.1 Max, which is a mouthful of a model to say the least. And one thing we didn't mention in the last episode was that GPT 5.1, it just came out like right as we recorded. So that's a crazy thing. So I wanted to take a second here just to talk to both of you guys, Adam and Ray. So let's start with you, Adam. So what are you thinking on this new GPT 5.1 and Max, if you've tried that one? What are you thinking about it?
Yeah, it was very interesting because we recorded, and then that very day GPT 5.1 came out. I have only messed with GPT 5.1, but as many of you know, over the last 9-10 days, I have been very heads down coding. So to me, that's what kind of proves out whether a model is valuable or not. 5.1 was kind of frustrating to work with for me. I didn't feel like much had changed. I felt like its design chops had actually gotten worse. I felt like, in general, to give you a little bit of what I was doing before, I was using Composer 1 pretty much solely because it's so fast. I understand the code base, so I'm kind of feeding it in what I want it to do. GPT 5.1 is so much slower, and because of that, my iteration time comes way down, but I also didn't feel like it was doing things that made sense. It just something felt off about the model. Ray, I showed you that thing earlier today, from a design chop standpoint. It's just weird. It does some weird things that I would not expect a model to do. Now, some people I've heard love the model, but for me, I got very frustrated with it and quickly went off of it. I don't know if you guys agree or disagree. Would love to hear that.
Well, what were your thoughts on it, Ray? Did you get much chance to test it out, or you were focused on other models for the last couple of weeks?
I tried it out, and compared to Sonnet 4.5 High, which I've been using a lot in Droid, I felt that the model just wasn't fast enough for me or accurate enough. I think there were a lot of things that I'm using a lot of Tailwind classes. I'm using Tailwind v4. I'm using the whole tokenizing system. And it just, for whatever reason, keeps reverting back and inserting stuff from the older training set. And that's kind of what I felt a little bit shocking. It's I have rules files, I have various things in my code base, and it seems to prefer a lot of things in its training set. And it's Tailwind v3 stuff, all the older stuff. And I haven't really remembered, but I think the cutoff date for this model is actually still older, for the base training data. And it seems to like be reinforcing older habits and things that I wrote rules for that it surprisingly didn't follow. That 5.1 did follow well. I mean, the 5.0 model, GPT-5 did follow well. And so after a couple of rounds of that, I just said, there's already other good models in the pipeline, so might as well just use them. And so just kind of just stopped using it right away.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's interesting thoughts there. Using it for design, I think like I've never found the GPT models to be the right ones to use for that purpose. So that's quite expected to me. But I did get a chance to use it quite a bit. Just more in ChatGPT, and now with 5.1 Pro that came out, I've seen quite a step up in terms of how thorough the model is. I think just the base 5.1, it is faster, and I think that's nice. And I tend to use these models not so much for design expertise, but for just detailed planning and architecture. And I still think these models are best in class at that. So that's been the case, pretty consistently. What I did find interesting though is when 5.1 came out, I put it on the benchmark with RepoBench, which is the repo prompt benchmark, and it actually shot up to the top. And it was the number one. But what's very interesting to me as well is that only the low version was at the top, like the low thinking version, not the high thinking version. And there's a lot of speculation as to like why that might be. And like my thinking on it tends to come down to this. So when I look at GPT models compared to Claude and other models, what I've noticed is that they are quite sensitive to noise in their context window. So if you have a lot of like unrelated context in your context window, that does tend to distract the 5.1 models quite a lot. And the RepoBench really stress tests that. And then also, I've noticed that GPT models in general are just not as good as Claude models at doing file editing, and other models that are doing really well at that purpose. And so I've seen it be quite sloppy at file editing as well. But with low thinking, it seems to do better. It gets less in its way. And when you have less reasoning, you're adding less noise into the context. So like if you think about reasoning, it's like you're adding tokens in the context window to kind of think about the problem before you get to an answer. And all of this reasoning, it sits in the context window. And if the model is more sensitive to noise in its context window, then its own thinking can get in the way of a good answer, which is surprising. And that doesn't happen with Claude models, which is interesting, as they are much better at dealing with that noise in the context window. So I just wanted to put a little caveat on that, just a little thought there. Now, in terms of the Max models, I'm sure have you guys tested those ones out in Codex? Have you played with the Max models at all? No, it's a no for you, Adam,
Nope.
and you, Ray.
Nope.
None at all.
No,
Okay.
Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I played with it, a fair bit. I used it. I find, it unlike, when you're prompting, Claude or some other, more general purpose agent models, they tend to be more flexible and conversational, and you can kind of run with them, and you can kind of try some things out, course correct, and keep going. I find GPT models are a little bit stubborn in terms of trying things. Like if you're deep in a context window and you're like, okay, actually, let's try this thing instead. It's like you're fighting you're fighting its inertia to
100%
kind of
agree.
try and do something else and like pull away from that thing that you've set. And it's very sensitive to this accumulated work that it's done and accumulated instructions. So the bigger that use of your context window is, with the more detailed your prompts are, the harder it is to get it to change course when you're deep in the context window. And that remains true with Max. But I find Max, if you do give it a good plan, it's quite the robot. It's able to kind of go ahead and execute dutifully, and get some work done. But again, like down to the file editing things I mentioned, it is a little bit sloppy on file edits, especially if you use tabs in your code. But what is interesting to know, like I don't use Windows, but they did say that when that model came out, they had trained it on PowerShell environments. So if you are in Windows, this is the first model that I would consider usable on Windows in the native terminal, which is really interesting. So yeah, good thing to note. And it is a good model, smart, very slow though. And yeah, if you're good with that, it's worth looking at. Cool. So that was a little wrap on the GPT series. What happened next is Gemini came out with their Gemini 3 model, and that was a big drop in the industry. It really shook things out. A lot of people had a lot to say about it. But before we get into like what the vibes, I want to hear like Adam, did you get a chance to play with it much?
A ton.
Okay, great.
Out of all of the 3 models that came out, that's the one I've used the most.
Okay, great. And what were you thinking?
So the way that I would kind of like put this is like up until that point, I had been we were heads down, tight deadline. So we're doing Composer 1. I'm hitting GPT 5.1, giving up on that, going back to Sonnet. So I'm a Composer 1 Sonnet. Gemini 3 Pro came out, and it's all about like, do I feel like I'm getting done what I need to? I felt like the model was phenomenal, honestly. Like I felt like I was able to 1 and 2 shot like plans that I was getting really great plans back from actually executing on it. And honestly, the speed, while slower than like a Composer by a long margin, it didn't matter as much because it was still snappy enough, and the quality I was getting was extraordinary. Now, I was doing a lot, so just the list of things that I was working on as part of this project, a lot of data engineering stuff, TypeScript, Python, we had React portions, Vue portions, and some PHP stuff that was actually in there. So we're working across a lot of systems. Never ran into anything that it did like a horrible job at. It did a great job like letting me steer it. So for example, if to your point that you were talking about, Eric, which drives me nuts about the GPT models, is they get very stubborn, almost to the point where they start ping-ponging back and forth between like I tell it to do something and then it forgets that it's supposed to be doing this new thing and it goes back to the old thing. Never felt that with Gemini 3. But there were a couple things that I think with Gemini 3 that were slightly irritating. Every once in a while in a context flow, it would just forget how to call tools. And it would talk to itself about the tools it should be calling, and then it would think that it's trying to call tools, but it's just imagine all that getting put in text. So like once that happened, there was no way to correct it. So like if I was like working on something, that's kind of just a broken chat at that point, so I'd have to start over. That's kind of frustrating. So then you gotta kind of like rebuild all that back up again, get your context where you want it and go. Not the end of the world. It only happened, across the days that I used it, maybe 3 or 4 times, but it was enough to be irritating to actually happen. The other thing that it drives me nuts is like if I tell it to go do something, it's very much a comment hungry model. Like I like comments, but I don't like comments that's like, that basically regurgitates what I told it to do. Like it's just a really annoying thing. Even no matter how I did it, just would leave comments in there.
Like leave code comments, or it would just comment in its thinking?
Leave code comments. So for example, I'd be like, hey, I want to switch this thing up. And then it would put a comment in there, switching this thing based on request. That's not what I want in my code. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want that in there. Maybe I'm just being picky. And that's
well, so Gemini 2.5, when that came out, it was notorious for the same problem.
For sure.
So it's interesting that persisted through here. Anyway, keep going. I was just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, I guess the final thing I would say is like, I really, really love the model. I think it does a great job at front end stuff. I think it's fast compared to like the quality you're getting out of it. I think it does a great job context gathering, building plans. There are some quirks with it, but when we get to the next model, we're going to kind of talk about like, you could look at my usage. It goes Composer 1, Sonnet 4, to a little bit of GPT 5.1, back to Sonnet 4.5, and then Composer 1, to all Gemini 3. And then the second Opus came out, I swapped over to Opus, and Opus is just
let's come
level.
back to Opus on that one.
Yep. I won't touch any more on that, but it's just a tough one.
Yeah. Okay, and Ray, how did you feel about Gemini?
I used it in AI Studio. I also used it in Droid, and I tried to use it in Anti-Gravity. And first with like AI Studio, I found it to be extremely impressive at design and understanding really large, complicated instruction sets. I actually put it up against Opus. I think at that time I did Opus 4.1, and I was basically doing a Kilauea. The big island here in Hawaii is currently erupting now, and I wanted to figure out the time window at which it would do these things. So I had these really, really long prompts and a lot of research and USGS government documents. I wanted to say, can I vibe code something together? And like if I was a government employee, you have to look through 5 different sites and be a geologist to determine, this like 5-day window of whether it's going to erupt and analyze this data. And so, Opus did its little design thing and it looked like very, on the web, it just looks like a really simple app. I threw that into AI Studio, and in one prompt, I thought, let me just see how much it can chew on just from the web. It did what I thought, like, back in the day with O1 and GPT would just take all the different instructions.
Mm-hmm.
Not only did it make the site in just one prompt, but it was already mobile friendly. It had like this data connect. It had so much detail that I was like, how did it do this? I didn't even tell it a design style. It came up with a beautiful, cohesive design, a design hierarchy as well. And like there, I was like, this is amazing. So I tried a similar prompt inside of like Droid the CLI, and it didn't come out the same way. I also tried it inside of V0 as well. And it didn't actually come out the same way as well. And I was a little surprised that there's like, to me, it got me thinking there's something in AI Studio that they must have.
How did you put the context into AI Studio?
In AI Studio, I just literally copy and pasted the entire like big prompt. Yeah.
Yeah. So on that note, like I think that's a common thread for most coding tools is that when you include the full context of your project as much as you can, and it's like the base of what I built with repo prompt, like that you get better results out of these models. Like they just see more of what you need them to see. They see less of what you don't need them to see. Like they don't see threads of tool calls. And they get better output. Like they're not reading small slivers. They're getting the full picture and able to work. So I just want to comment on that. Like, so I don't think it's just AI Studio. I think it's just the way you're prompting it.
Yeah, I always do that, especially across all the different tools I use, because I get to see what are the actual agents, the harnesses or whatever that's sitting on top of the model. Are they picking things apart and then only sending certain things in that prompt? And then there's also a hierarchy that they can also do. And that's what's been interesting about repo prompt, right? Because you reveal different pieces of that and just say, here is your entire prompt that you're going to send raw to the model. And so that got me really thinking. For anti-gravity, I just couldn't get past the rate limits. With one prompt, I was pretty much done. It looks so promising. But I just recently heard that if you have a workspace account, so I have like my domain and .com in a Google workspace, I don't have the same limits as just a regular Gmail account.
Interesting.
And so somebody said, if you just switch to your Gmail account, you're probably actually going to have higher limits. I was like, now you tell me, bro. So
I mean, that's a big story about Gemini is that, the best place to use it typically hasn't been Google's tools. Like, I mean, AI Studio has been great. It's nice for free, that you get a lot of usage, but anti-gravity, the CLI, they put such tight rate limit, and on the CLI in particular, they only just as of Monday this week, we're recording on the 26th, they released all the they had a wait list, and only now have they rolled it out so that you don't need a wait list. As long as you're on a paid plan, you have access. So before that, you'd sign up and on the paid plan and say, hey, like you get more Gemini 3 usage on the CLI and on Jules, and anti-gravity is not on that list. But then it wasn't true because you needed to have a wait list, and now it's finally true. So if you had the ultra plan that was like $300 or 300 Canadian, like $200 a month, 250 or something, I don't know. Then you got immediate access, but that was like a whole rigmarole to get access to. And then I saw earlier this week they actually pulled all usage of Jules from Gemini 3, so now it's back to 2.5 for them. And then anti-gravity is you can't pay for it. It's only the free tier. So that's like kind of annoying too, if you want to get use of it. So I did try anti-gravity a fair bit too. And I think the cool thing about it is that it comes with a Chrome extension that you can set up. And then when you're working on a web app, it's able to kind of run the web app in Chrome, inspect what it's doing, and take screenshots, scroll through your page, click around, and then review its work automatically in a tight loop. And I found that was helpful. It didn't work perfectly when I tested it. There was some clear issues. It took screenshots at weird places. So I think there's some work to be done there. But I think in the future, that kind of integration is going to be important. And of course, I just hit errors right away on anti-gravity, and I wasn't able to use it. And surprisingly, Sonnet was working better than Gemini 3 on there, which is very surprising to me.
I also want to add that what Adam was saying earlier about comments, that's the other thing I kept seeing with this model. It wasn't as crazy as the previous 2.5 Pro, but they would show up. And also, it's extremely convincing at writing code, if you don't review it, to convince you that this is the right technique that it's doing. And you have to be very, very careful with it. And I don't know how, but I'm just I got a little cautious. I was like, this looks really good. And then I was just actually running through the data model. I was like, wait, I use convex a lot for the database, and I actually have specific instructions. And the reason why I use convex is because everything could be reactive. And so I noticed that the Gemini models got like extremely aggressive about, hey, I can write all the state on your front end. So that way, like, it'll be doing all the stuff. And like, I'm being smart. See, look what I did. Here's some comments that kind of lead you through it. And I was like, that's not what I want. it's everything's on the back end. Convex has just a single query that I can just pull that in and refresh the app. I don't need to have you write extra things to justify why you're so great at doing this. I understand that, but that's not needed for this
It's
framework.
like patting itself on the back, like, oh, I did such a good job. Oh, look at that.
Yeah, it's like the Obama meddling himself like thing. It's like that's what I felt. I was like, okay.
Oh man.
I was like,
That's cool.
that was interesting. But
Yeah.
I'm using this framework and it has a really like it's not in the training set as often. That's just been really interesting.
It's always a big challenge.
Yeah,
It is,
It's
Yeah.
So
On the I agree with you. Day one of Gemini 3, by the way, was pretty rough, I think, for everyone. At least for me. Like, I used it a few times, was able to get some prompts through, then it errored out. So, like, I had kind of, on day one, been a little bit frustrated just with its availability. So I was like, okay, give it a day or two to smooth out. You mentioned all of the capacity issues that they're having across the board. I kind of wonder if Opus 4.5 has alleviated some of that for them. Just to, like...
Probably.
I wonder if it was like, because a new model comes out, literally everybody's hammering it, 100%. Like that's all we want to use. So I do wonder like what it's at now, because over the last I was doing some evals this morning. I'm getting ready for my December evals. I was running. I haven't hit any API errors or anything yet, so I don't know. We'll see.
Well, over the API, I hadn't had any issues with it. Generally, it was quite stable. It was really just when you're trying to use it with their paid plans and their subscriptions that they were really trying to load balance. And I really feel like they're pulling allocation in different places, and you could really feel the Google bureaucracy of where they're putting usage in that distribution there. So yeah, I think over API, if you're doing your benches there, I think you should be pretty set.
And Cursor was great, by the way. Like I like Cursor. A couple things. Otherwise, it was just solid across the board for Gemini 3.
I had a question on your plans, Adam, because I noticed my Gemini plans compared to the Sonnet or Opus plans weren't as comprehensive, even inside of Cursor, because I love Cursor's plan mode. Did you notice a difference between the two?
Yeah, when we get into Opus, we'll talk about a lot of that stuff too when Eric kind of leads us in that direction.
Yeah.
But I will say Gemini 3 does do good plans, but you do need to iterate on it a bit more because then like what I thought I had to do with Opus, for example.
Mm-hmm. So I just want to put a little cap on the Gemini story here. The story's been, it's all over the place in these different CLIs. People are trying them in different places, getting these different results. I wanted to make a quick note that, so there's the AMP CLI tool. They had made it their default. So they're all big about having the best model as your default, and they make executive decisions for you and take away the model picker. And they made it the default. They were very confident. They had some trade-offs with it, but they felt like it was so good that it was worth switching away from Sonnet for. And then I noticed, I think it was yesterday, that the creator of the Ghosty terminal, who's one of the biggest users I've seen on Twitter X of AMP, so they had just released an Opus 4.5 experiment, and he immediately switched over and he was like, oh my god, thank you for getting rid of this Gemini for me. So that brings us into Opus 4.5, and I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on. So that one just dropped this week on Monday. Big release, made a big splash. So what are you all thinking? Adam, you've been holding yourself in. You're like, you want to get into the Opus side, so tell us, what are you thinking?
So so this is at a time where I'm like heads down coding. I hear about it. My initial reaction is it's going to be too expensive for me to use. So, it's like, oh, cool, a coding model, one that's probably out of reach for most people. So then I had a chance to look at the pricing. So first thing I want to touch on is the pricing, while higher, is so much better. Mm-hmm. So much better than the previous Opus version. So then I was like, all right, I'm going to just use Opus from here on out and give it a try. And I didn't look back, honestly. Like, you look at my usage, I was not jumping back to Gemini 3. Opus 4.5 was just solid. Like, plan mode. The group that I was working with, we were like testing some pretty hard, like, multi-domain things that we're rolling out. And it would come back with a plan, and we're like, dang, that is actually really good. And then we'd have to go build it. And we do like one or two follow-ups, and it was like building just fairly complex systems, to the point where we're like, one of the guys on my team was like, well, we don't even get to do anything hard anymore. Like that's literally what he said.
Yeah.
So, but regardless of all that, I think Opus 4.5 is awesome. I hope they don't mess it up. I hope the pricing stays good. The speed and Cursor in particular seem good. the speed in Claude Code felt slower to me, which I find kind of odd. I don't quite understand why Claude Code wouldn't be faster.
It could
Totally
be a difference in token budgets too. I'm curious to what their thinking budgets are set
Yeah.
to. Mm-hmm.
And it is more expensive, but the cache reading's good. The design, I've heard some people say it's not good at design. I don't agree with that. I think it's amazing at design, like doing front end stuff. But I think its magic is like being able to work across like domains and just come up with like great technical solutions. And yeah, it is right now my favorite model. But to be very clear, in terms of time, I probably have about 2 to 3 times the amount of time with Gemini 3 than I do with Opus 4.5.
Mm-hmm.
So I've worked across like more projects and more things. So, it may change if I get into other things that I haven't done with it yet. But I freaking love it. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, right. And Ray, what are you thinking about it?
I immediately started throwing really difficult tasks at it, and I was just enjoying its thinking through these different issues. And I was a little impressed because it came back really fast at a solution. I'm like, did you think through this? And then I looked through it. I was like, actually, yeah, it just makes a lot of sense. So one of the issues I'm facing down is a performance issue. And what I'm doing is I'm loading 10 gigabyte files on the browser. And I'm doing a bunch of like WebAssembly type of problems. So like literally just, memory in, memory out as fast as possible, doing some processing and some cool loops. And, I have to like really whiteboard this stuff out myself and think about it, thoroughly, and then say, okay, I'm not a WebAssembly engineer. Maybe I worked on some C stuff back in the day, but this is the web, right? So like, this was a fun problem to throw at Opus 4.5, and it came back too fast at the results. And like, how do you know this? It's like a lot of my benchmarks for the memory, everything just started going down. I was like, wow, this is super duper impressive. And I don't know what is in that model, but I was immediately impressed compared to Gemini 3. It just, I was like, okay, this is a guy I want to really work with and talk with.
All right. Yeah.
And then I started pointing it at all my other performance issues on the browser and saying, okay, I want you to kind of do a thorough review. And so I actually did the same prompt inside of like Droid and Cursor, and I wanted to see which agent would actually be much more thorough at this type of workflow. And I was actually underwhelmed with Cursor's output. And it seemed to be just like super fast, get to a conclusion, like, here you go. And it's the same model, in the same, like, the extra thinking max mode brain for Cursor. Mm-hmm. And then, with inside of Droid, I had it just on high. And it seems to take extra long, like not timing wise, but like it seems to think a little bit longer in the Droid compared to the Cursor one. And I don't know, like there is a difference between the harness, and I'm actually running a similar task right now in Claude Code, the actual app, but Claude Code does take forever. It does take, seems like forever in these times, but yes, it seems to take extra longer to do these tasks. Yeah.
So I've only used it in Claude Code myself, though I did bench it over the API. And, so just to caveat, like I just want to start this off. So if you add thinking, Opus 4.5 on my bench, repo bench, it scores number 1. It's the top model. What's interesting is that when Gemini 3 released, it actually scored number 26 on that bench, which was very surprising. Like I had to extend the leaderboard because it wasn't fitting on there, which was very upsetting. I reached out to the Google team on that one, figuring out what's going on, and I think it's down to just file editing quality, and there's something about Claude that is both in terms of how it understands its context and how it can edit files so cleanly and clearly, and how it's able through deep in the context window with all this junk in there. Their training, they have a special sauce around it where it's able to just stay coherent and on track and, pivot and stay nimble. So there's something really special about that. I think, Claude models in general, and Opus 4.5 is no exception. I think it's one of the best like engineering models. So like able to kind of debug an issue, find the data, be data driven, like find information, look at the data. Oh, how do we debug this? How can we checking its work? Looking through, okay, we're good with that. And it's just better at using the terminal, better at like finding its way around and doing work. So I think that's just like, there's something, really magical about that. I don't think that like I'm going to turn to Opus for like deep thinking, deep engineering tasks of like thinking through like architecture of like what's the best way to do this really complicated thing. I still turn to the OpenAI models, especially 5.1 Pro is out now, and that one stays very, very good for that. But Opus 4.5, I think there's nothing that's better than it if you're using a coding agent in a terminal. It's just so good. It's nice to talk to. It's fairly priced, and it was great with Cloud Code if you're a Cloud Code user on the Max plan, is that they actually matched to usage of if you had Sonnet. It's the same usage as Sonnet, so like you're not using any extra you don't burn your limits faster, so you're able to really just fully switch over, and they made it the default, and you're not burning through limits any faster. So that's great. I want to say one thing though. So while Opus 4 and 4.1 to an extent, it felt like this is a different model. This is like Opus, the bigger brain. Opus 4.5 feels like a smarter Sonnet. It feels like we're like lifting up the bar of Sonnet. Like here's a model that's like maybe adding some IQ points to Sonnet. It's able to do good work. And one last point I just wanted to throw in there is turn on thinking for Opus. So there are some notes on X. Someone was mentioning that they felt that Opus 4.5 without thinking was less smart than Sonnet without thinking. And then that's actually the same results I got on RepoBench as well. So interesting to consider that if you want it to be as smart as it can be, you got to turn on the thinking. So that's something to think about. I
also want to add that skills have been important for me because I've been adding them in and sort of treating skills as these empty areas, especially since I'm working with something like Convex. It's not really in the training set. And so as I go through things or as I discover and do research, I then have the Opus model write its skill file for me so they can go back later on and just load it in when it needs it. So like if I'm doing like, this like specific data state management thing that's sort of unique, but whenever it does encounter this in the app, I just have a little rules file that says, hey, go take a look at the skills if you're going to be working in here, even though I'm not like specifically using any keywords. So as like kind of a double way to kind of like, oh yeah, I should probably load that in its thinking, that type of thing.
Very good.
And I think that's going to be an interesting way of like, I almost call it like skill hacking. It's like, can you stack skills in repos and have the agent build them itself? Because it does seem to follow those tool calls and the skills and other little additional things. And I see it more on the web, especially when you create like a Claude project. And even for non-coding tasks, it's just extremely thorough at those in Opus 4.5 than I've seen it even in the Sonnet 4.5 as well. So
definitely, yeah.
To add on to that, I would just say like Opus 4.5 to me is so much more enjoyable to work with than Sonnet 4.5. And you guys know this. Everybody probably has to do this. So like when I was bouncing between Composer 1 and Sonnet 4.5, every time I would go to do like some sort of code review to see if I'm going to actually like push it up to actually have it PR'd. There's like 5 bajillion markdown files that Sonnet 4.5 decided to make that I have to go remove. Like you've got to go through and like clean up a bunch of stuff. Opus doesn't seem to do that. A small thing, but it is very annoying, like how much wasted token Sonnet 4.5 has in just extra things that you don't want it or necessarily need it to do. The other thing I found Opus 4.5 to do is it picked up the way we do testing very well, to where it would actually go through. I would talk about a feature. I wouldn't even ask it to go and like write the unit test for it, but it would get to a point where it's like, hey, would you like me to go do that? And it understood the structure of this massive code base, like absolutely massive code base, well, to be able to set things up properly and then be able to run the particular test and iterate on it. It's honestly so much fun to work with.
But
that's
just to be clear,
Cursor,
Adam,
right?
That's what I was going to ask.
All Cursor for that particular case. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. It's interesting. There is a note that they mentioned when they released Opus 4.5. They mentioned that you have to be a little less harsh and intense on your prompting for it. Like when you would say Sonnet must do XYZ, Opus should do XYZ. So just thinking about like how you're prompting the model, how you're building your rule files, it does tend, from my experience as well, to better adhere to those rule files. So that's something to think about. You don't want to overdo it on the rules and make sure that the model is able to kind of steer in the right. It seems to be better at instruction following, so you got to watch out for that.
Eric, I wanted to throw a wrench in here. Maybe I know kind of it's a little bit out of order, but I was thinking that last time we talked about if we had $200 to spend, what specific models we're using, and I think since then we didn't have a lot of airtime or code time with Composer 1. I know that Adam got to use it a little bit, and I'm kind of curious from Adam's perspective. Like you've been using Composer 1, Gemini 3, now Opus 4.1, pricing, speed versus accuracy. I feel like everyone's now converging on speed and accuracy at the same time. What are you reaching to now? Like if you had the same $200, Adam, kind of curious.
See, it's so tough. Like, right, I am actually paying for the $200 a month Cursor plan because of just how good I think Cursor is now. Which, if you go back in time, I've been very critical of Cursor and felt like they've done some things that were very anti-consumer. I feel like they've hopefully learned from that and they've turned things around. I still despise their credit system. I absolutely wish that we could move away from that. Like, just give me API, like give me some transparent way to understand how you're billing, not tell me how many tokens and have the credit system behind it. So I guess if I only had $200 to spend and I didn't need to code beyond the capacity of like Cursor's $200 a month plan, I probably would do that. But you are limited because you can burn through that $200 very quickly, especially if you're just using like Opus 4.5. For example, in a matter of like 2 days, I burnt through like $75 on the Cursor plan just in 2 days. So
it's worth noting too, Adam, that they're currently billing Opus at half price on Cursor.
So that's going to also suck when that changes. So that's a good point. So if I were to spend $200 today and Cursor was out of the question because it wasn't enough usage, it would 100% still be Claude Code, $100 a month plan. And then I would most likely, I would love to have some way to get Gemini 3. But all I'm hearing about access to the Gemini 3 plans, that just seems kind of odd right now with the way you authenticate through Google Terminal. So I'd probably still do the OpenAI Codex $20 a month plan and then fill in the rest with some API usage. That's the way I would do it.
So just to know, to go back to the Gemini story, with the $20 a month now with Google's plan, you do get a decent amount of CLI access, and they have opened up the gates to everyone on the CLI.
So all the limits are lifted now?
I haven't used it enough to hit the limits.
Okay.
The thing that's a little annoying though with the Gemini CLI, and I've mentioned this to their team on Twitter, is that they're a little sneaky with the model routing. Like, you're using the Gemini CLI and and then you're gonna run into some limit, and now you're on 2.5 Pro. And then now you're on 2.5 Flash for some reason. But it turns out that if you start the Gemini CLI and you put dash model and put Gemini 3 Pro preview, then you're going to be only using that model. And I was like, why can't I just do that from inside like, why do I have to start this launch lag? And there's a lot of strange decisions by Google around this release, but that's one of them. But there are ways around them, and $20 does give you a fair bit. And you still have the Gemini app and the Gemini.com, whatever. You can still use that. But then AI Studio also gives you a lot of Gemini 3 usage for free. So there's a lot of places to use it for free. Depending on how you hit the limits, might be worth trying that. Anyway, just wanted to caveat that. Ray, how's your spending changed since release there?
I'm very biased because, I have used Droid. I love it so much. I reached out to them to sponsor my show, and I deeply like the way that they handle this infinite context, and that's kind of why I've been so biased. And I use Cursor and both of them a lot. Like, maybe for me it might be like, if I had infinite money, which one would I kind of reach to all the time? Mm-hmm. Adam is really convincing me to go ahead and like just go all in on Cursor and just, Gemini 3, because I think that's a really interesting perspective, especially that things you're calling out there, Adam, about this longer context thing. And then these other things that are just kind of, it's picking up as it goes for that type of experience. And the thing that I find enjoyable about like Droid and stuff is the fact that how, they have this unique compression thing that I also want to test with Claude Code. Mm-hmm. So Claude Code, and apparently Claude Code has this new capability now where you can just kind of have this really long chat conversation, and it's supposed to do this nice compression. And I think it's built into the way the model does it, or their tool call. It's not really, really clear what's happening there, but it feels like you should have a longer conversation.
So they just announced that, but that was actually for Claude AI, not for Claude Code. So the website. And I think they've already been doing some work on calling some tool calls with microcompacts, but the big change there is on the website or the desktop app. So that's worth noting. Mm-hmm.
Oh, dang. Okay. Yeah. Because I've had like 10 million token sessions in Droid, and like it stays to the spec file. It stays anchored with all my rules files. It just keeps going and going. And for me, it's like, okay, I have a feature and I just can see it from planning to ship, and MCP tool calls and everything all in one session. And so that's what's been interesting for me. And I haven't seen any other, I think Augment Code may have been doing something similar. I need to try them again and see, what they've been up to. But they're
also moving towards the complicated credit system. So Good luck figuring that out if you do move over
And
to them.
it's not to go off the rails there, but it's even worse than I think some of the other ones. And Warp also did the same thing recently. I mean, I think they have to, but it should not be credits. It needs to be cost plus. Anyway,
Yeah.
Ray, to your point, it is interesting that you work that way, where you actually are trying to like run these very, very long, deep context conversations. My workflow typically is like I try to break things up into the point where like I'm constantly starting new chats. So if you were to go look at my Claude Code history, in a period of a day, I'd probably have 20 chats where I've maybe even more. I haven't looked. Same thing at Cursor. Like I end up with a bunch of tabs, in the Cursor IDE, all that because I like working on a very focused feature or thing. And then I like to say, like, okay, now we're going to edit that thing. So I go to a new context. I tee it up with the context I need, and then I go. So it is interesting. I haven't never thought about it from the standpoint of like wanting a 10 million or, super long chat. I actually get annoyed kind of when they go and start doing context compression. So I just try to avoid that, honestly. So when I see any sort of like you got 2%, I'm like, all right, time to start a new chat and start working.
Yeah.
Yeah, previously for my workflow, I would just open new windows all the time. And, I would actually be extremely diligent. At 50% was my marker. And I, in Claude Code and even in Cursor, but I had the same problem. I'd have 50 chats. So I'd have like a plan chat. I then have like a handoff. I'd write the markdown file, waste a bunch of tokens there. And then I actually have like documentation workflows that actually have a spec file and also has a progress file. And then I would hand the progress file and the spec file into every single new chat. And like I was just doing this over and over and over again. And I got so kind of exhausted because like I just want to do a bug fix and then another bug fix and another iteration. So I had so many chats and I was like, okay, I have to go back 40 different chats because I'm still going to go back to phase 2 of the plan. And I need to continue phase 2. And, because I like to do this waterfall method of like, the plan, build, iterate, and then fix, polish, and then, ship it, and then go back to phase 2, and then like just keep doing that. And I'd have these like diffs in essence. Like I also started doing like stacked diffs. So it's like every feature gets a PR, then I add another PR on top of that, and I just keep PRing until I have the whole feature set, and then I could just, ship it and close the PRs, and everything gets built on the server too. So it was like this.
And all these PRs are one chat for you.
Yeah, it probably comes from just working at Apple old school wise. It's like ship, test, iterate, keep doing this thing again. And maybe I'm just trying to like, for me, it was just a little bit exhausting keeping track of all the chats because the UI for Cursor's chat history is just like only scrolling, in a timeline where I kind of need like more of like a grid or something.
Yeah, I usually like just kill, like I imagine when I go to a new chat, all my other ones no longer exist anymore because I feel like I've moved past that point. So it's very interesting to. I don't know. I think I need to think a little bit more about how you're working and see like if that makes sense for some of the things I'm working on.
Well, hold on. In my mind, I think it really depends on the tool that you're using. Like I think Droid, they put a lot of elbow grease into making that possible. But I think you're fighting a little bit on the gravity of the model's context window, and these models just aren't built. They're not just not great at doing this kind of thing. So you really gotta work around them to kind of get this possible. But I get it. Like this is a lot nicer of a workflow to just keep going, pick up where you left off. But like I just think, right now like models just they do better early in the context window. And if you're always full with stuff, and even if you're compressing all the way, like there's stuff that may not need to be there. So it's a little tricky. So I get, Adam, I'm a little bit more along your approach too. But I do want to mention as well, like if you're using Opus 4.5, like it is a lot more resilient to noisy context windows, and it's able to keep going further. And I have found that in Claude Code in particular, if I'm doing compacts a few times, it's able to kind of pick up the thread and keep going. However, I don't trust it to kind of write a bunch of novel code at that point in the context window after a few compacts. Like you got a lot of junk in there. So what I do though, I'm a big fan of combining models together. And lately this week, what I've been doing a lot with the repo prompt MCP setup in Claude Code, I'll be like, hey, like get a second opinion from GPT-5.1 on this idea before you kind of proceed with your implementation. Like you're like here, because as you're deep in a context with a lot of context, and you've been through compacts, like the model has a lot of understanding of what you've been doing. So it's able to know what files to kind of pull out and give to GPT-5 to kind of think about. And it's able to kind of do that to kind of think through problems. And I found a few times it caught a lot of issues with what Opus was trying to do. Even with a detailed plan, Opus made some syntax issues, or like one issue is it was trying to iterate over a dictionary and pull stuff out and mutate it while iterating, which is, if you've used a lot of languages like in programming, like, mutating a dictionary during an iterator, that's just that's a cause for a crash in a native language. So, I didn't see it right away, and then it gave it to 5.1 and it spotted it right away. So having, these models check the work of each other, it's very helpful stuff. Yeah. Any closing thoughts on Opus before we move on to the next topic there? No? All right. So this is a small call out I just wanted to make. So there's someone on my Discord this morning who was reaching out to me, and he was trying to figure out this right setup to kind of get this working for the benchmark in repo prompt. But he tested Kimi for coding, which is a new model that kind of just showed up, and they didn't really talk about what it is. But surprisingly, on RepoBench, it scored 72 or 73%, which is on par with Opus non-thinking, which is very surprising to me. It's like the other Kimi models didn't do nearly as well. So I don't know what special sauce is going on there, and there's to be TBD on more to come for that. But if you are interested in Kimi, worth taking a look at that. What's interesting to me is that it's the highest score for any non-Western model. So that, to me, that's a big shot across the bow for the Western labs for coding workflows. That Kimi has something cooking there, and it's worth paying attention to, especially now they got their nice Black Friday plans. Worth thinking about if you're interested in that. So, any other thoughts on that? I guess you guys haven't tried that one out, so I haven't really played with it either. So I just want to make a little call out for it. Cool. So next thing, I just wanted to take a little moment for us all to go around. As we're wrapping up here, I just want to do a little tour of like what's your terminal setup like. I know you guys are both like I know Adam's using Cursor a lot lately. Ray's using Droid in the terminal. What's your terminal setup looking like these days, guys? Like how are you guys working with these models?
I guess I can go.
Yeah, go for it.
So for me, it's literally just ZSH in the shell.
Right on.
I don't know. I'm so old school. I think it's just kind of been simple that way. I don't want to overcomplicate it. I do have, I want to learn a little bit more, to be honest. I know Ghostly's come out. I know there's a whole bunch of other, somebody talked about Kitty, and people have rewritten stuff in Rust and so forth. And I know a lot of these for terminals, all this is text, and some terminals could be optimized to re-render for graphics work. And it's like text is only updating in the screen. My screen update refresh is maybe 120 hertz, 60 hertz a second. I'm not playing games in the terminal with text and stuff like that. So I don't know. Like in these, my CLIs are only drawing, so many frames per second, and that's all I need. But I'm really curious, does anyone else use anything else that's, I
just want to make a quick mention on this. So while that default terminals here on macOS worth mentioning, Ray, because the terminals do change per OS, but on macOS the default terminal doesn't have tabs, and that alone is like a big blocker to using it for me. So I switched over to Ghosty pretty much just for that. And Ghosty is an open source terminal. It's more performant than the built-in one. And the thing that I like a lot about it, beyond the tabs, which, I'm opening tabs all the time, starting new chats, with these models, is that it is more performant. And so if I'm pasting a lot of text, which I do quite a lot with these coding agents, you feel the difference. Like if you use the built-in terminal, you're pasting a lot into Claude Code, it can buckle down the terminal, and you can feel there's like a big lag for that text to make its way through. But if you're using Ghosty, it's instant, and that alone worth the switch for. Yeah.
Okay, I think you're convincing me.
Yeah, right on.
So,
tell us, Adam, what's going on?
I mean, I agree with you, Ray. So if I'm in an IDE, I use just the basic Bash or ZSH or whatever I happen to be using at the time. I kind of have them all set up. Actual best terminal for me, a terminal emulator really, would be the what they do with warp.dev. And I know I'm not a big fan with their pricing and all the stuff they've changed and the AI side of it, but from the terminal experience, it's amazing. You can, and just the most minor things, being able to select text in the middle of something you pasted in and edit it. I know it's minor, but you actually have an editor, you know what I mean? And then you got tabs built in. There's some AI assistance in there. Honestly, I really, really love their terminal experience that they've got. That's my go-to.
Very good. Yeah. I'll mention a little shout out. One thing that a lot of folks in my Discord have been doing is they run tmuxes So that's just basically a terminal multiplexer if you're not familiar. So they want to see a dashboard. They want to be like those finance guys that have like 18 screens at the same time. They want to watch these 8 coding agents, 20, 30 coding agents running at the same time, fill their whole screen with, I mean, it's a little bit intense for me personally. I'm not running that many at the same time. But if you're one of those people, might want to look into a Tmux. Could be worth your time. Cool.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're coming up on time, I think, for today. I just want to do a little quick final shout out as well. Adam spent a little time, at a conference this week. You any highlights you want to take about the AI engineering conference?
Yeah, so it was AI Native DevCon in New York. So it's kind of a short trip because I was in Atlanta. I had to fly up. Honestly, some amazing people there that I got to actually talk to both after the talk I gave, which is really about how we are evaluating LLM's ability to code and why it's such a difficult problem, and some of the things that I've done so far and discovered. All of that was great. There was one talk in particular that I thought was very interesting. It was from somebody from OpenHands. I think one of the founders of OpenHands. The talk was called AI Hates Legacy Code. And, a lot of the world that I've lived in the last 3 years, honestly, has been, legacy code is like 20, 30 years old. I've been working with code that's less than 5 years old. So it's very, very new. And it really made me think, because I have actually worked with code bases, and I know, Eric, you're probably in the same place coming from Unity. Like, there are code bases that have been around for decades and have stuff that are still, that the people that wrote that code no longer are at the company anymore. So you have no context around it. So the point that he was trying to make, there's a bunch of it, but my big takeaway was, it's not that, people that are working in legacy code bases all are afraid of AI. They're afraid of changing the code themselves because they don't understand the context.
Yeah.
So it's like, when you have AI going in there and messing with something that you don't really fully understand, that no one at the company fully understands, but it kind of works. It's a very different paradigm to kind of think about.
So the best part about this is that the tests are often completely misleading, and he'll give you no signal whatsoever as to what the code is doing or if it's working, because it's a feature built 20 years ago by someone, and then a bunch of other features are built on top of it, and you have no idea what the downstream impacts of one line of code is that seems innocuous. All the tests are fine. You don't know what you actually just did there, so you got to watch out.
Yeah, I'd love to add some insight to that after you kind of talk about that.
I'll just close out here real quick, Ray, and then pass it to you, because I think the big takeaway for me is, like, I've been so much thinking about it in terms of building startups and writing, it is a very interesting, like, mind shift to think about what it means to work in, like, very old code that a human is scared to actually edit. And then what happens when you put AI in there? And to Eric made the exact point that the guy from OpenHands did, which is you make a change and it literally breaks things that you don't think are related at all. Like, and that's just, so is it really these engineers are afraid of AI, or is it more that the engineers they're just afraid of changing anything in that code anyway, and then AI just adds another layer of uncertainty to the whole thing. So anyway, it is, and having worked in some large code bases very recently over the last 9 days, I totally get it. I'm starting to come around to, like, why it's such a difficult thing, because you can't find the person that wrote the particular thing that you're trying to debug or figure out. So anyway, Ray, I'll pass it to you. But I thought that was fascinating. I know people could resonate with that.
Yeah, I think that's a great topic that I'd love to deep dive further, because in a lot of my experience, this also happens in, like I used to work at a company, and the code base is like 30 plus years old too. And there are like file systems that are, 20, 30 plus years old. And then, like, I worked on a project where the file system literally got rewritten, and you have to have, like, I worked on the update stack. So you talk about updates that have version mismatches and all this legacy type of things. One of the most valuable things, because the company notoriously kept the teams extremely tiny, is the value of a QA engineer. And a QA engineer that not necessarily just was writing tests. The value is in the integration and the actual understanding of the procedures of the company's output. Every single detail matters, from when it leaves the factory to when it actually goes through all these different processes. These people are extremely valuable and add that extra layer that an engineer really can't think about day to day when they're writing code. And it's actually a different brain that is required for thinking about these problems, because they'll actually approach it more from a user-centric standpoint. And so the bugs that they find there have actually a higher priority for fixing, and they have these established tests, that things that they check daily, every week to every month. And so it gets me thinking that maybe we are also going to turn into QA engineers too, and start to think about it that way. And the AI can help us actually grab the relevant pieces of code or maybe debug faster. But you have to maybe think about these things maybe in a more procedural business operations type of way of like, okay, what parts of my software stack are the highest impact for customers that have to be tested every day? And then, do we have humans around them actually going through these workflows if we don't have some type of test or some type of first gate, signal? Because if a build breaks, now you have 20,000, 30,000, however many millions of engineers that you have across the globe, like Microsoft, right? These people are going to wait on a build, and then that's wasted money. And so some of these tests can help, find problems, like find the smoke. The human goes and takes a look at the fire and see what bigger problems, because there have been some big, massive bugs or refactorings of things where like we forgot like literally one function, and it just broke things in ways that you're like, oh yeah, of course, we didn't think that was relevant, but now there's this really weird use case with the old version of some other thing that when it gets introduced into the new ecosystem, it now throws everything for a wrench. It's like,
or like,
how are you going to update older code from a thing that doesn't even take software anymore?
Yeah, the other thing is like, you guys have definitely dealt with this. There are times that a service exists that has a bug in it, and getting that updated or changed in some way is just not going to fit the timelines around what you need to release. But it's not like a major bug, so you can kind of work around it. So you make decisions to now like build around this flaw. Eventually that flaw gets fixed. What happens to the stuff that you actually did to kind of so there's like all of these little micro decisions that happen to try to like get something out the door, and then people forget about it. They forget that like, hey, if I update this thing to make it the way it should be, the correct, we're going to break all these people over here that had to work around the way it was before. It's just, so anyway, like when I think about the pockets of people that are AI coders, there's people like us that like are fully bought in. We love it. It works really good, especially on fairly newer code bases and you're building up. They're the vibe coders that just want to like make 0 to 1 stuff. Then there are the people that are working in these like banking core systems that were made 50 years ago. And like, I have a lot of empathy for those people being scared of putting AI on their system, where before, I was of the mindset like everybody should be doing it. But I've really started trying to like, kind of look at it from the perspective of if I as a human am scared to change something, putting AI on that actually is going to make it more tricky.
There's a couple other axes there too, though, is like an AI model is only as good as its training data. And, a lot of these enterprise legacy code bases just don't exist on the web. And so the AIs just don't have any idea how they work. And it's not just the languages too. Like you might have like a shortage of COBOL online, which definitely is the case. But it's also like each enterprise code base is its own beast. And even though it shares like technical, stacks with other things that are on the web, the code itself is like an intricate machine that the AI wasn't trained on. And to your point, Adam, there's these flaws that are kind of caked in and worked around that like the AI has no idea about. And at the end of the day, an AI model only knows what it fits in its context window. So if it's poking around trying to find some things, it'll make judgment calls with what it can see, but it can't see everything. It's just impossible. So, for now, this is an inherent limitation. And so you have to work with it to find out what you should give it as information. It has to complement your own knowledge. It's a very tricky thing working in these code bases with AI models, and you have to treat it almost like you're training up a new hire, but every time you use it, which is kind of upsetting to do. So you can't just vibe your way through it, which is a big issue.
Nope, you can't vibe your way through these old code bases.
Yep. Yeah,
but I thought it was a really cool perspective.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that's there were other good talks, but I think that was probably the one that stood out the most.
Very good. Well, thanks for sharing that with us, Adam. And I think, honestly, that's a good place for us to wrap for today. So that is episode 5 of Rate Limited. So thank you so much for joining us this week. So I'm been your moderator today, Eric. There's thanks to Ray as well and Adam as well. So hope you join us next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much.
Peace out, everyone. Take care.
Take it easy, y'all.